This is the Journey Podcast. We highlight the journeys of our guests, where they've been, where they are now, and where they are going. Let's join them on their journey. Well, welcome to the Journey Podcast. Today we have an exciting guest, Mark Herschberg of the Career Toolkit. The Essential Tools for Success is the book that he wrote. But beyond that, Mark has just done some pretty amazing things, from tracking terrorists on the dark web and creating fantastic digital spaces. Mark is a master at starting new companies, because that's basically what he does, is help start new things, not only his own things, but others as well. And he also helps start the Career Success Accelerator at MIT. And I don't want to give it all away in the intro of everything that Mark has done, because he's done some pretty incredible things. So welcome, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for being here. I am just completely fascinated by all the things that you've done. You're still young, and yet you've done so much. So tell us a little bit about what you do in the business that you're in.
I have a couple different things I do. You mentioned, for example, the teaching at MIT. Now, it's a side hobby business of mine. So we created MIT's Career Success Accelerator, a program where we're teaching the skills that universities don't normally teach: leadership, communications, team building, networking, negotiating. All the skills you need to be successful as a founder, as an owner, as an employee, but they aren't taught. So that's a side business. That, of course, spawned the book, The Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You, the app that came from that, the Career Toolkit app, and the speaking I do. But my primary job is I am a CTPO, a Chief Technology Product Officer. And I have done that where we've created startups. I've done that as a consultant, as a fractional CTO and fractional CPO. At this time that we're recording, I have a new startup. I'm starting with a guy I've worked with in the past. So we're launching that. And then I also have another app I put out, the Brain Bump app, which spun out of the app for the book, which is just another side venture of mine. So I keep busy doing lots of different stuff. And then, of course, there's volunteer work and some other stuff too.
So are you a developer, Mark, or are you just the idea man and then you build a team around you?
I was a developer. I can still probably write some code, but I'm pretty slow these days. So for example, for the Brain Bump app, I got an offshore team of developers, designed the app. Now, I did get a graphic designer because my design skills are limited, but we thought through what is the use cases, what do we want to do. I designed the architecture. I'll get into the code with them, but my days of writing code are a little bit behind me.
Yeah, it's hard to know everything, so building those teams are important. Tell me, these different businesses and ventures you've done, how are they related?
Some of them are, some of them are not. So the new venture that I can't really talk about, that is just a new tech startup. It's kind of standalone on its own. It doesn't relate to the other things I do. However, when it comes to these three other main areas, so we have the class at MIT that I've been teaching for years, and I recognize we wanted to reach more people than just those students in our program. And of course, this is not just for college students. This is not just for engineers. These are universal skills for everyone. So I wanted to get a greater reach, and that led to the book and the speaking that I do. From doing that, I realized there was a gap in the market, that when people read a book, say, okay, well, this is great, this is useful, but then they forget it all 2 weeks later. And that's not helpful to the reader, because, of course, the reader, you want to remember what you just spent all this time learning.
Right.
It's also not helpful to the brand. Now, I don't do executive coaching or other things, but many people who write a book like mine do so. And the book is part of their marketing. It's how they build their brand and get known. So they want people to remember them. Well, that also doesn't work if someone puts down the book and never thinks of it again. So how do we keep the brand top of mind, but also help users retain that information? And that's where I saw a gap. So I created the Brain Bump app, which combined my education experience, the content, and of course, my technology background.
So it appears to me through some of your career, you've kind of focused a little bit on business risk assessment, a little bit, cash risk, not necessarily like I don't know, like liability of somebody slipping on ice, but really the risks that nobody really thinks about. Would that be true?
I'd say that's somewhat true. My graduate work, of course, was at MIT in cryptography, which is the math underlying encryption codes, which is the basis of a lot of cybersecurity. And so that training really taught me to think about risk and how much it's worth to counter that risk and if it's worth countering that risk. So there's some fundamental training in how I think, not just as an engineer, but in risk assessment. And so, of course, in my work, it's not just, well, how do we protect this data, but what could happen to this business? What could go wrong? What could go right as well, but what can go wrong? And how do we minimize those risks?
Yeah. So what would you say is, in your opinion, that's what I was leading to with this question, but what's the biggest risk a business has, either starting out or things that they forget along the way?
There's no one thing, but let's go through some of the most common.
Okay.
One is not understanding the market. People think, oh, yeah, I know how to do this. Hey, I know how a bakery works. I've walked into a bakery, you bake some things. But if you don't really understand what goes on and the details and where are the margins and where are margins thin and where's their supplier strength and buyer strength, if you don't understand that, you're putting yourself at risk. So understanding your market is first. That's both generally and then, of course, having a clear business plan. I see very often issues with co-founders that you and I, let's say we have this great call now, we have a really good time on the podcast, we like each other, and we talk for the next few weeks and say, oh, let's do a business together. Yeah, you seem great,
Yeah.
I seem great. But wait a second, doing a company together, it's like getting married. And we
Yeah.
need to be very careful. We need to understand each other and what we want, our expectations, and to have that prenup, to have that founders agreement about the work you're doing and I'm doing and what happens if one of us doesn't do it. That's very important. And then there's the actual execution, which could be anything from I'm going to try to do it all myself, and you don't realize you're not equally good at all. I was a coder. I'm not a good coder anymore. I'm too slow. I should give that to someone else. But then also, people get tripped up where they say, oh, hey, you do coding, you do marketing, you do whatever. Yeah, I'll hire you because I don't understand that. And they make a bad call, blindly buying a product or service they don't understand. And it's not a good use of their resources. So those are some of the most common that I see.
So depart a little bit from a little bit more of a fun question. So if you were Dr. Evil, how would you attack a company?
Oh, that is a great question I have not heard before. Well, my initial approach, because of my cybersecurity background, would be to hack into it and to look at stealing their information, destroying their information, gaining some type of control. So I think I'd go with the cybersecurity approach.
Go with the hacking side. So, okay, so you've done a lot of different ventures and startups. Can you tell us about your biggest failure and how you overcame that?
Oh, wow. Biggest failure. There have been so many, it's hard to choose. But I would say one of my early failures when I came out of MIT, I was probably a little bit cocky. I thought, hey, I'm MIT, I got a couple degrees, I'm pretty smart. I know what I'm doing. And I showed up to work, and yeah, I was a very good technologist. I was a good engineer in terms of creating things, but I was not good at communicating with other people. I wasn't good at building relationships. I wasn't good at recognizing what was going on in the company. It turns out our co-founders had a falling out. They wound up suing each other.
Ooh.
And the signs were there, but I didn't even pay attention to them. Now, thankfully, it wasn't something that caused a problem for me. In fact, I had opportunities, but it could have been a problem. And so I quickly recognized I am short-sighted. I might be a good engineer, but I am really weak on these other skills. I began to recognize their importance. And that's when I set out on a journey to develop it in myself and quickly realized the skills aren't just for senior leaders, they are for everyone. So I began to upskill my team. And when MIT said they wanted to do this, I helped them create that program. So I recognized the weakness and took steps to address it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the Career Success Accelerator at MIT, and I was going to say I took that course at the School of Hard Knocks because nobody else had that. And I got knocked around. I think a lot of us, like yourself, we get knocked around a lot, and there's no buffer and insulation to help us get through that.
That's how so many learn. And at the start of the course, I often say to my students, I am here so you don't make the same mistakes that I had to suffer through. And that's the purpose of the book as well, to help people really leapfrog over some of those early pitfalls that you and I suffered through.
Yeah, it's so important. So did you have a mentor to help you get through those things, or did you have to struggle through it yourself?
I had a few informal ones. I was fortunate that my very first boss, John Christensen, and the one who succeeded him, David Urey, they were both very good bosses, not just technically capable, but good people. And so I learned some people management skills and other skills by watching them. It wasn't a formal, let's sit down and do it. It was more informally seeing what they do. And I certainly had other people along the way give me advice, give me some guidance. I probably didn't have as many formal mentors as I should have had early on in my career.
Now, is that something that's a part of your life now, more formal mentorship for yourself, or have you not found a value in that?
No, I have. I probably don't sit down and say, hi, will you be my mentor? But there are relationships I have with people where I've really just learned a lot from them. And we have that relationship where I can ask questions, we can learn, we engage often. And so that's been very helpful in plugging in some of the gaps. And they've come not just from the work world, but from other places as well. In fact, one of my ex-girlfriends was fantastic at certain skills and really taught me a lot. Obviously, that wasn't the primary nature of our relationship,
Yeah,
but I certainly learned a lot from her.
and learn a lot from almost every relationship you're in, actually, whether positive or negative, even the things about yourself. So, what would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing right now, the time of recording in business, and how are you overcoming that challenge?
Right now, I'd say there's two challenges. For the company that I haven't named, we've been fundraising. We did raise our seed funding. Certainly, as we look forward to the coming months, the market has changed. As we're recording this in June of 2022, we just saw the market enter bear territory.
Yeah.
And even though VC should be taking a long-term view and saying, who cares about the market today? Because we're looking at exits 5 to 8 years from now, VCs have really tightened the purse string. So going forward, some months out, when we look for the A round funding, I think that's going to be a challenge. And then for my Brain Bump app, there it's a double-sided market. We have content people providing content to the app, and we have app users who want to access that content. It's always a balance, because if you have a bunch of users and no content, they're going to walk away. Bunch of content with no users, they're not going to want to invest in putting content there. So it's always a balance, trying to get both sides to move together to create value for everyone.
So I wanted to go back a little bit. You said you're doing some fundraising, and I think that's an area of weakness for our audience, and even for myself. You know, working in the Midwest, we're bootstrappers here. We just go do stuff, and we're not big fundraising business owners. So is that something that you find is easy to do because you're New York based, or was that something that you really had to learn as well on how to do the fundraising?
So first, let's note what we're talking about with fundraising. We're talking about VC investment, maybe
Right.
starting with angel investment, as opposed to a bank loan or a line of credit.
Correct.
And certainly that makes sense when you're looking at a growing company that you will eventually exit through a sale or IPO. There are small businesses I've run where it's just, hey, this is just something I'm doing. It generates some free cash flow. I'm not looking for outside investment. I'm not trying to grow it, where this is of interest to VCs. But if you are looking for that, so here's the secret. VCs are the easiest people in the world to meet. Now, I know that's counterintuitive. People who don't live in these communities in New York and San Francisco and Boston, I think, oh, you hear these stories. But in fact, VCs are so easy to meet. So VCs are driven by two thoughts. The first is, I don't want to screw up and make a bad investment. And they are extremely cautious. Despite the name, despite the venture, VCs are some of the most conservative investors you will ever meet. And they will delay you and delay. The joke in the VC world is they never say no, but they always say maybe. Because, oh, you have a good business plan now? Well, you probably won't get someone else funding you in the next 2-3 months. So if I say maybe, let's see how you do in 3 months. I've only de-risked. I only get more information. Are you growing? Did you screw up? So VCs are super cautious. But the other thing driving them is, oh my God, am I missing out on the next big thing? And so to counteract that, they are all constantly looking around and saying, what's going on? What's happening? Do you have an interesting idea? Because we don't know who's going to be the next unicorn. And they want to get everyone aware of who they are. So everyone sends their pitch decks and the VC can make the decision, not have you make the decision not to use them. So VCs, you can certainly cold call and send them a pitch deck. Now that means it goes right to some analyst, some junior person who does the first review, but they will look at. It doesn't go into, the circular file, it's never seen again. Someone will look at. Obviously, if you have a connection, it maybe moves it to the top of the pile, but even my connections to VCs, that doesn't mean they're going to invest in a really crappy idea. The one caveat with that, VCs talk about they invest in teams, people, not products, because they know the product will change. They want to know, are you capable of executing? And sure, if they've known me for years, that gives me a little bit of an edge, but they don't like the business model, that doesn't help. So VCs, don't be intimidated by the fact that they seem so far away. If you put in the work, you can reach them.
Interesting advice. I appreciate that. Some different path for some of our listeners there today. Tell me, what do you think is the most important lesson you've learned in your career so far?
That the skills that I teach, the ones we talk about in the book, leadership, networking, negotiating, communication, these skills, you don't have to be the world's greatest at them. You just need to focus on getting a little bit better, because marginal improvements in these skills will generate a compounding effect leading to incredible ROI. So don't worry if you're not great, just work at getting a little bit better.
Good advice there. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about this, okay? We need to know about ballroom dancing and Halloween parties. Tell us a little bit about that.
It would surprise many people that MIT has one of the oldest ballroom dance teams in the country. And when I was there, we were arguably the top team. It was between us and I think Brigham Young arguably had some very top competitive dancers. So we had this incredible team. We've produced national champions. We actually had, I think our peak were 125 people on our team. And I was lucky to join the MIT team. And even though it's a sport, it's not NCAA. So there weren't rules about you had to be in school. So the MIT team was actually open to student, staff, faculty, and alumni. And throughout my 20s, I trained, I competed, I went to a national championship for 6 years in a row, went all over the country for competitions. And that was just an incredible period of my life where it's a fantastic activity. I made a lot of friends. It was a lot of fun. And the Halloween parties, I love Halloween. I've been doing Halloween parties. I did them for 23 years straight. We took a pause the past 2 years because of pandemic. So I didn't want to crowd my apartment as there was a virus going around, but I hope to resume them. I love Halloween. So every year we do a party, costumes required, and I do a costume contest to award some of the amazing costumes I've seen.
Well, that's fantastic. Halloween party sounds great. Do you ever combine Halloween and ballroom dancing? I don't know. Is there costumes in ballroom dancing ever?
We refer to them as costumes. Certainly when you think ballroom dancing, for standard and smooth dancing, the men are in tail suits and the women are in ball gowns. And then for Latin and rhythm, the men are usually in some type of like spandex shirt, and we wear a special type of Latin pants. And then the women are in some type of outfits. We just call them Latin outfits, but something usually kind of on the sexier side. But I'll note that the dresses women wear, they can run thousands of dollars. I've seen them $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and that was 20 years ago. And of course, our tail suits are a special type of custom-made tuxedo. Not quite the same as a tuxedo. They're cut differently, so they can be very expensive as well.
Fascinating. We could do a whole episode on that. And did ballroom dancing, was that helpful in networking for your business?
That was helpful two ways. First, absolutely in networking, because when you do a sport like ballroom dancing, or really any kind of hobby or activity or something not related to your business, you're going to meet a wide range of people, and they're going to come from different fields. Now, some will be in my field. I've met other technologists, other startup people, but I've met other people in other fields who became friends of mine, and it allowed me to access their networks, their knowledge. So I highly recommend doing activities where you're going to really expand your network that way. The other way it was helpful was with my public speaking. And this surprises people because, as you're probably thinking, you don't do a lot of talking in ballroom. We're there dancing, not speaking. But what's happening on the ballroom floor is you are out there quite literally being judged. And if you think about public speaking, the biggest impediment for most people is fear. It's the standing up there and, okay, what if I forgot to zip my pants? And what if my shirt's unbuttoned, or I say the wrong thing, or I trip, and this is right in your head and you get really nervous and scared. And better speakers, I still get a little bit nervous before I go on, but I also know, look, I've done this many times. I'm going to get through it and it will be okay. And ballroom dancing, as I'm on the floor, I've screwed up many times. You do that step and you do it wrong. I go, oh, crap, I can't believe I did that. And, oh, yep, the judge saw that. The audience saw that. But it's okay. In fact, one of the things I love about ballroom, I've seen a handful of couples trip. Occasionally it happens. And when they do, the entire audience applauses when they get back up. It's the, hey, we support you. We are here. We're behind you. We understand. And once you see that, you know, yeah, I'm going to screw up on stage, but people aren't going to be laughing at me. They're going to be supporting me. No audience member wants to see you fail. And so I know with that gave me confidence to make me a better public speaker.
Great advice. Yeah, it's interesting about the public speaking. I think you would have to go to some training or join Toastmasters to really get it down. Okay, so you said that you were starting a new business, and I know you can't talk about that, but what's the next business that you would like to start?
Next. Well, I do have, in addition to these two we've talked about, the one that I can't say and Brain Bum, I do have some other books sketched out. I actually started working on an early draft of my second book. We'll see how long it takes me because I have pauses as I work on other things. So that's another project I have on my to-do list.
Any idea of the category? Can you share the category the book will be in?
Well, it will be in the same vein. It will be professional skills and things that we use in our career. So I'll probably keep doing a few more books in this category if I've got the time for it.
Okay. Okay. So tell me, you're doing a lot of things. How or what is the most underrated tool that you use that you couldn't live without?
Another great question. I would say my network. And this is important. Most people think of their networks just as, oh, I need a job. I'm going to go to my network. Hey, do you know anyone hiring me? Sure, use it that way. But your network is a tool. It is an extension of you. And so when I have a problem, and I don't know how to solve it, I go to my network. When I first realized I was writing a book, and I wasn't intending to write a book. I thought I was just writing up some notes, and then I realized, oh, I think this is a book. The first thing I did is I went out to my network and I talked to some authors I knew and said, hey, I'm doing a book. What should I know? Give me some advice. and they were there to help me. So your network is a tool that can help you solve a variety of problems where they've got more expertise than you.
It's fascinating. We hear that a lot on the Journey podcast. If you haven't heard it yet, use your network. There's more there than just sales leads and prospecting, but there's so much available to you out there. It's a matter of get out and meet people. Well, Mark, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us on the Journey podcast today. Can you give us 3 books you would recommend to the audience to read?
I'll give you a few, and on the resources page of my website that you'll get in a moment, I have a list of about 30 that I recommend. But a few books that I've liked, Peopleware by Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister. That is a book on management. It's technically on software management. There's no software involved. Best book on management I've read. The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Caban teaches you how to have charisma. And that is great for many people, especially introverts like me. And then if I had to pick a third book, I would say Range by David Epstein, that talks about the importance of developing a wide set of skills instead of just a deep set of skills, which I am a big believer in.
Good books to check out there. Okay, Mark, if I were starting a business today, what are some words of wisdom you would give me starting out?
Find a good partner if you can, someone you can trust, and create that prenup, and then leverage your network for all the problems that you have.
That is contrary to every piece of advice I've ever heard.
How so?
Very, very rarely has anybody ever said get a partner. They say run as far and as fast away from a partner as possible. So that is
a partner you can trust.
You are correct. Yeah.
Because no one person is great at marketing and sales and engineering and product and finance and operations and HR and all these different aspects of the business. So if you can find someone else, and there's a study at Sloan many years ago that found the most successful startups had between 2 and 4 partners, 2 and 4 founders, because you can fill in the gaps that I have and I fill in the gaps you have, and that makes us stronger overall.
I agree. I like the unique advice. It's quality is what we're going for.
No partner is better than a bad partner.
Yeah, you are correct. All right, so I asked you a lot of questions, Mark. What's one question you wish I would have asked you today?
Tell me about Brain Bump.
Oh yeah, tell us about Brain Bump a little bit.
The Brain Bump app, as I mentioned earlier, there's this idea that once you finish a book, you quickly forget it. And so we need to change how we look at content and let people access content when and where they want it. That's how content will be accessed in the future. So the way the Brain Bump app works is that you download the app. We have different content available: books, blogs, podcasts, classes, talks. And so you can select, oh, I'm reading this book, or I want to learn more about that podcast. So you can select the content you want. Like a Kindle, you select the content. And then what you get are highlights, literally things that if it was a book, you would highlight, or it would be those key points that just came out of this podcast episode. There's 2 or 3 takeaways. That's what's in the app. So you get all those highlights. You can save them to your favorites. You can look at them when you want. So for example, if you're about to walk into a networking event and you've downloaded my book on this app, you'll get the highlights from my book. You say, what were those great networking tips in Mark's book? I'm going to read them 2 minutes before I walk in the room. So you get that just-in-time access. The other way it works is it uses notifications. Now, it puts a notification once a day at a time you set. So it's not one of these annoying, oh my God, my phone's going off. It might be 9 a.m. as I start my day. I want to get a leadership tip. I want to help keep this top of mind for me. So it does that push notification you look at. It's okay, good tip, good to remember, swipe, done. So it just takes a few seconds a day. And of course, everything is hyperlinked at the bottom of each tip. If you want to go to that actual podcast episode, that blog, that source, you can go and, hey, let me hear the rest of that podcast. Let me read that blog article. This sounds really good. So it's a different type of content access. The app is completely free on the Android and iPhone stores. Brain Bump. You can search for it on Android. Apple, apparently the search isn't working in the App Store. So if you go to Cognosco Media, COGNOSCO media.com, you can go find Brain Bump. It'll link you to the stores.
I'm excited about that already. I think that's what I'm going to go download after this episode's done today, is Brain Bump, and check that out. I'm excited, and I'll put my thoughts up on LinkedIn here about how the app works, because that's my problem. I read a great book. Hey, you should read this book. I forget half of what I was going to tell you about it, though. So sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. You mentioned Brain Bump. How else can our listeners find out about Mark, and how can they engage with you?
You can go to my other website. So I gave you Cognosco Media. My other website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. And there you can learn more about the book, The Career Toolkit. Follow me on social media, get in touch with me. I put out new articles each week. And then there is the resources page. And that's where I list 30 or so books that I highly recommend, as well as a whole bunch of other free online resources. And all of that is available at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Well, great. Mark, I really appreciate you taking the time and just talking to us, telling us about your journey a little bit and all of the many projects you're working on. I'm excited to learn more about them and see how we can continue to engage with you here on the journey.
Thank you again for having me on the show.
Thanks, Mark. Have a great day.